The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the interpretation webinar today. This is Dr. Richard Barwell, and what I want to do today is, because I know that the doctors that are involved today, the doctors and staff that are involved today, have had some information regarding brain activity and entrainment and using the Zen frames, which we love. I'm going to be a little more detailed about what's going on than I would say just directly to a patient. But this will be rather patient-oriented. So we just start out with this statement that I kind of like. It says, I think and therefore I am. We've heard this. It's been around for, as you can see, many years. And so the way we relate to our world is how our brain functions. And so we needed to find out more about brain function because we also have this. I don't know, so maybe I'm not. And this is more truthful today than probably in the past, because we have more stresses and more doubts and fears that really interfere with how that brain functions. And we need to really address those kind of issues because those issues enter into our health in a broad spectrum. So I want to just talk about the difference between brain entrainment, which is what goes on when you're using the Zen frames, versus neurofeedback, because there's quite a difference between the two. And the brain entrainment and the Zen frames fill in a beautiful gap that really helps patients respond. Whereas if you want to take it to the next level where you really start to offer patients a great deal, then you're going to start looking at neurofeedback. And chiropractic plays a role in both of these. Because the chiropractic adjustment effectively allows the nervous system to reset itself to a higher level of function, whether we're doing brain entrainment or neurofeedback, it's always very advisable to do the adjustments first and then offer the two training tools that are involved in changing those brain patterns. So brain entrainment is a synchronization of a brain to an external frequency. What we mean by this is it's like when you're driving down the street and there's trees along the edge of the road and the sun is shining through them and you get these retinal flashes going on. And you feel drowsy, you can't keep your eyes open. What they've discovered is those retinal flashes have a frequency of flashing that makes you produce brain waves at a certain level that makes you drowsy. Low alpha and high theta brainwave frequencies. The glasses do the same thing. They don't train you how to get there, but they allow you to experience it. And that's one of the problems we have when we just jump from people into normal lifetime and then start doing some neurofeedback training with them, is when you say, well, you need to produce more alpha waves, and they go, what's that? I don't even know what that is. And it's rather like me trying to explain what chocolate cake tastes like to an individual who's never tasted it. Well, it's sweet and it tastes like chocolate. Well, what's chocolate taste like? Well, you know what? You just have to taste it. And once you taste it, now you can say, you know, this coffee tastes like chocolate, and people go like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Because if people haven't experienced what it feels like to generate alpha waves or theta waves or beta waves, and they don't know how to get there or what that feels like, that's what the Zen frames do. They help get that experience in that people. Then if you add neurofeedback on top of that, where they now learn how to do this, it says we show information back to the person and we reward the brain for changing its own activity to more appropriate patterns. So if we're trying to get them to relax and they now know what it feels like to be an alpha because they've used the Zen frames, then what happens is they start to be able to dial in alpha because they know what it feels like. And then we can teach them how to do that themselves. And those are the two critical differences between the Zen frames and the neurofeedback and the role that the chiropractic adjustment plays in both of them. So here's the real problem. The real problem is the brain's impaired ability to regulate itself. And what happens with us in our lifetimes of high stress life, I mean, we're talking not just road rage. My wife was talking today about, John Tesh was talking on the radio today about pedestrian rage, where you're walking along the sidewalk and the person answers the cell phone in front of you and slows down and you bump into them. And so we have these kinds of stresses going on all the time in our life. and they start to unbalance the nervous system. The nervous system starts to build patterns of stress that are not resolved, and it can't regulate itself. And that's why the glasses work, that's why chiropractic work, and that's why especially neurofeedback works. So here's what we look like with an unbalanced nervous system. If we have a balanced nervous system, we've got a beautiful looking thing. It works the way it's supposed to. And we can have a nervous system that shifts to over-aroused or one that shifts to under-aroused. Or we have one that then becomes bipolar, and one day it's over-aroused and the next day it's under-aroused. And that's worse than just being one or the other. And these both lead down into an exhausted nervous state. And this work was done basically by people that were our experts in the neurofeedback world for the last 30 or 40 years, Siegfried Optimer. And we took his book, A Generalized Approach to Neuroregulation, and we looked at it and we developed the biochart is what we call this. And we use this in the offices for people to be able to understand what's going on. And this is just a beautiful referral tool. And I want you to look at this because I know that there's offices that are involved in things such as weight loss and focusing on weight loss. But the thing that we need to look at is, why did the people gain the weight in the first place? What happened to them that they started to change their patterns, and all of a sudden we end up with this obesity challenge that's going on in America today? So if you have a nice balanced nervous system, you've got high energy and excellent health, and you're active and no infections, everything's going well. If you have over-aroused, we see that there are signs and symptoms that go with this. As a matter of fact, we can take every single illness that's known to the medical world and break them down on the symptoms, the symptomatology that allowed them to classify it as a disease, and put it into one of these categories. So what you start to see is you see people with over-aroused, got cold hands and cold feet, or anxiety, or heart palpitations and restless sleep, high blood pressure, irritable bowel. That's a sign of an over-aroused nervous system. And people check these things off. Or they may be under-aroused, and you have poor attention, or they're impulsive, they're easily distracted, they're poor concentration, they're depressed. They become irritable, and we know about depressed people. We know what one of the side effects of depressed people. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then they get worse, and we end up with this unstable, where you may see some in one side and some in the other. And if you see some in one side and some in the other, then you're going to start to see the unstable areas showing up, where you see migraines and headaches and seizures and PMS and eating disorders, mood swings, panic attacks. If it continues from an unstable and over-aroused, we're going to start to see signs and symptoms of an exhausted nervous system. And those are all autoimmune system disorders. And look at them here. They're nasties. And we see these in the office, but you have to understand why this is happening. So this gives us an idea of what's going on. Besides that, when the patient fills this thing out and they look at it, here's the interesting thing about it. All the things that they've checked off here are not diseases. What they've checked off here is a result of, or a manifestation of, the nervous system not working in a balanced method, not being able to adapt and respond and recover to its stresses in life. And they get stuck in a pattern, and it starts to show up as either over-aroused or under-aroused. So do you think it's more advisable to take care of their signs and symptoms, or is it more advisable and beneficial to them to get them back to a balanced nervous system? The answer is obviously a balanced nervous system, and the minute the patients say that, now they're coming to see you to have their nervous system corrected rather than to have their back pain removed. So this is an important shift point. So under-arousal is the problem with disorders like depression and ADHD and ADD. And we know that depression, one of the offsets of depression, is eating disorders, because endorphins are produced for food. So when people are depressed, they start to eat a lot of food, and they eat the wrong kinds of food. And so this is why this is a key issue. If you're really going to focus in your office on weight loss, you need to do the whole gamut and not just one part of it. Over-aroused is a problem with anxiety disorders, including panic attacks, post-traumatic stress disorders, agoraphobia, etc. Here's the things that happen with this. With the over-arousal, we start to get the nervous system really going into high gear. When the nervous system goes into high gear, it demands a lot of energy. Where does it get its energy from? It gets its energy from the Krebs cycle, which involves liver and pancreas functions and sugars. And the people will start to get their diet shifted towards that instant reward of sweets. And so now we've got a different type of eating disorder that's all based on neurological responses. Instability, that just means that the problem is now getting worse, and now we have bipolar disorders and seizure disorders and migraines that start to show up on top of all the rest of it. The exhausted deals with autoimmune system disorders. And this is where the nervous system is now so out of order, so dysfunctional, that the immune system has lost contact with the nervous system as far as what's dangerous and what's not dangerous. And the immune system just says, I don't trust you, I'm attacking everything. And that's what it starts to do. It starts to attack all the healthy cells because it doesn't care anymore. It just says, I'm attacking everything. Everything's an enemy, and that's what I'm going to treat it as. And we end up with arthritis. We end up with Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue syndrome, cancer, ALS, multiple sclerosis. Those are all autoimmune system disorders. And all it is a nervous system that has now gone out of control. So we know this. We know that we have certain kinds of responses that are at the limbic system level of the brain. That's the protection, the oldest part of the brain. And the initial response is, and here's what I'm talking about. When we get initial stress response, adrenaline and cortisol and glucose are increased. There's where the eating disorders start to really show up in the short term. Energy mobilization, cognition and performance, everything goes up. The immune system kicks into high gear, blood pressure goes up, muscle tone goes up. But look what goes down. Digestion, sexuality, reproductive hormones, growth and healing, and extremity tension, those go down. But if this stays, it's an adaptive stress response. This was only designed to be there for a very short period of time. If it stays any length of time, we start to get a prolonged response. Look what happens now. The immune response gets decreased, memory and learning go down, sexuality and impotence go down. In sexuality, you get impotence, and that comes into play, I should say. Pain tolerance, skin conductance, you get dry skin. Then what happens is, look at what goes up. Insulin resistance and weight, fatigue, stress, hypertension, respiratory problems, infection start, bone decalcification, strokes, digestive illness, renal failure. All of these things go up when we see people that have been under stress for a long period of time. So this is an important chart, and we have this available for offices for our clients to put this up so patients can see this. So neurofeedback leads to improved brain self-regulation. That's the key to good health. That's why using the Zen frames start people on this road, but you need more than this. And you'll notice that the adjustment works very well with the Zen frames, but if you're doing then neurofeedback as well as this, then you've got something to work with. So what we've done, and most of you had this done on the weekend, I know that Carrie Ann was very busy and did a great job there, and so you got these stress response evaluations done on the NeuroInfinity. And so what I wanted to do is I just wanted to take this is what the report looks like, and it has these bar graphs that are all multicolored, and I just took the heart one to show you something here. If you notice the different colored ones in the heart, you started with a turquoise color. That's when you sat there with your eyes open as a baseline, and then the next gray was a baseline, eyes closed. Then the green was the math test, and then the recovery was the gray after the math test, and then there was the noises, that's the dark blue, and then there was the recovery, and then there's the breathing exercise, and then recovery. Now, all of those colors, we can look and see what was going on in the heart during any one of those tests, any one of those arms of the test, and during the stress times, which happen to be all the dark colors, and during the recoveries, which are all of the gray colors. And then we can look over at the stress response, and we can apply that to everything from brain activity to hand temperature to skin conductance, respiration, and so on. We can see exactly what was going on at any time in there. Now, there's two portions to the test. The one portion, the EEG, looks at what's going on at the cortical level of your brain, the newest part of your brain, the part that stores your experiences and your memories so that you have something to make decisions from. It relays its information down to the thing called the limbic system, and the limbic system controls all the rest of these on this chart, all the 6 that are below that: heart rate, skin conductance, hand temperature, respiration, muscle tightness, heart rate variability, blood pressure. Those are all controlled by the limbic system. So we can see what's going on in that portion of the brain by doing this test. What this gives us is this gives us some great information, concentrated information as to how to apply either the adjustments and what technique to use, or the Zen frames as to what program that they should be working with. Or with neurofeedback and biofeedback, we now have guidelines as to where we need to go to be able to determine what's going on, and especially with the frequency, the duration, and the intensity, or the technique or type of adjusting you're doing with the patient. We can determine this now, what they need based on this report. I think all of you got this, and if not, we will make sure you get one of these. This is the stress response evaluation ideals, and it shows you what each one of them should look like ideally, and it talks a little bit about them. And if you haven't got this, then we'll get it to you. If you have, I hope you've read it over and taken a look at it, because it's going to come into play when we're talking about these reports. The first thing, and this is the biggest one to learn right now for the doctors, all the rest of it, the doctors took when they were at chiropractic college. They know about the autonomic nervous system and what it does, and how it's divided into sympathetics and parasympathetics and so on. What we didn't take was we didn't take anything on brain function. So I just need to spend a couple of minutes just sort of showing you what these charts tell us. So the very first thing we want to look at is we know that the brain produces a whole bunch of different frequencies as it functions. And the ideal brain is what is called the brain that has neuroplasticity. In other words, it can dial in whatever frequency it needs depending on the situation or the environment. So to be wide awake and alert and responsive, especially when danger is around, we want to dial in the beta frequencies. And these frequencies you can see are the tallest in this particular one right now. Matter of fact, they get as tall. If we averaged them out, they would be about 32 on this scale. And then what we have, if we're going to go to the other end of the scale, we're going to look at theta. Theta is actually a sleep. It's light sleep. It's rapid eye movement sleep down towards deep sleep, which is delta. We don't show that on here. And we can see that if we took theta and we averaged it out, it would be about 19. That means the ratios between theta and beta in this particular one are 13. Anywhere between 5 to 15 is considered to be the normative range. The ideal is about 10. So beta should be about 10 points higher than theta to be ideal. Well, 13, that's pretty good. So this ratio is good. Then we look at the ratio between theta and alpha, and they should be about the same. And if we averaged them out, they would be in this one, so that's good. SMR, sensory motor rhythms, they used to be part of beta. What we've learned things in the last 5 years, they now don't consider that part of beta. It's something special that happens when that frequency is involved. And it should be between 5 and 10 on this scale. And you can see we'd average this out. It'd be pretty close to about 5. Okay, so that's what we're looking at for ratios here. We want to make sure that this person is awake and alert and responding the way they're supposed to, and that means they should be producing more beta than they do theta. If there was too much, if more theta than there was anything else, the person would actually be asleep. So that's what we need to look for. We can tell what's going on, whether it falls into a natural ratio, or if beta is too high, we've got an over-aroused cortex. If theta is too high, we've got an under-aroused cortex. And there's a consequence to that. Okay? So ratios, that's what we're looking at first. Then the next thing about the EEG, and these tell us a great deal, is what we'd call the picket fencing. So that every time that they were stressed, like an eyes open versus an eyes closed, all that information coming in from the eyes, which is a tremendous amount of information, goes to the brain. The brain needs to be paying attention because now it's got more to work with, and beta should go up. You close the eyes. That's why you close your eyes when you go to sleep. You shut off a lot of that information, and beta drops. Then we did the math test, and you can see how the focus would happen. The beta has to really be focused and thinking about it, and it goes up, and then it should relax with the eyes closed in the recovery. It should go up during the noises and relax, and it should go up during the beta when you're focusing on how you breathe, and then down after. That's what we expect to see with beta. Up with the solids, up during the time of stress so that you can get out of the way of the bus that's coming down the road on you, or the big lion that's chasing you. You can focus and do what you need to do, not fall asleep. And that means when these go up, the alpha and the theta should go down during those stress times. And you can see here they do. All the solid colors are lower in both theta and alpha, and the solid bars are taller. This is a good report because you see that alpha, that's conscious relaxation. This person can consciously relax, can sit there and literally dial themselves out. But not only that, they can also subconsciously relax. Most people have a problem with this. And subconscious relaxation is very, very important because that allows us to drift into deep sleep and not be processing all of our doubts and fears at our subconscious level. Remember, theta is subconscious. Everything above this has a level of consciousness to it. Beta is very, very alert consciousness. So now we have the two things we're looking at. We're looking at the ratios, and we're looking at the way they can dial in or dial out the various frequencies when they're supposed to. When you put the glasses on, it's going to take you to these frequencies whether you like it or not. That's the retinal flashing and the binaural sounds that create that, and they stimulate left to right hemispheres. So they're very, very powerful to use. So here's the first one that we have here. And the person that has this, if they're on the line, and I hope they are, will recognize their own chart. I took the names off so you can't see them, but we can see what's going on here. And this is how simple this is. So over here on the right, I put in the ideal so you can take a look what it's supposed to look like. And you can look over here, and the first thing we look at, the ratios are pretty good, 20 to about 31, and so that's within that normal area. So the ratios are not a problem with this person. But then we look at the picket fencing. Look at beta. It should look with the taller ones to be top. We still don't see that here at all. As a matter of fact, there is nothing that really spikes up or really spikes down. During the math test, they really shut down completely. Instead of engaging like the one on the right, they turned off completely. So they're not able to focus well when they get put under pressure. They're not able to focus really well with the emotional ones, with the sounds, or with the breathing. So there's a real focus challenge here. Even though they're generating more beta than they are alpha and theta, and they're awake, they're just not awake and really alert, especially during stress times. So then we look down here, and I'm going to jump you down to look at alpha. And you'll notice that alpha looks pretty good. It's got the nice tall gray columns like it's supposed to. That's a good sign. This person can consciously relax. Now, let's look at theta that should look just like alpha. Those gray columns should be tallest. We see that they're not. In fact, in the breathing time, the solid color was taller than the gray. So what this tells us is this person's subconscious, which is like 98% of brain activity, never really shuts off. It's going all the time. And all of our doubts and fears and the stuff we never talk about with anybody else is kept at theta levels. So this person is grinding away all the time subconsciously, even though they can look very consciously relaxed. With our sensory motor rhythms, we're not seeing the kind of responses we should see either. The gray column should be taller in sensory motor rhythms. They're not really. So we also note that this person, as time goes on and stress goes on, cannot sort of think clearly. So what effect is this having on the limbic system? Well, we look down at the heart rate, and gee, that's not bad in the heart rate at all. We've got some pretty good stuff there. I'm going to just do the same one. There we are. So the heart rate gets a green circle around it to say this is good. When we see something bad, we just put a red circle around it. So with patients, it's very simple. So this is not right. This is not right. Your brain is not working. The cortex of your brain is not working the way we'd like it to work. What's the effect of it? Well, heart rate variability, I've got it up here on the top right. That's this one right below, should look like this. All the columns should be tall in that middle group, and there should be very little columns in the very low and in the high. So it should look like that. We notice that his doesn't look this way, and it's bigger on the right-hand side, which tells us that his heart rate variability is not working the way it's supposed to. It's not slowing down when he breathes out, and it's not getting a chance to rest and heal. And the worst time was during the noises, which is an emotional test. So when we put this person under emotional situations, his heart takes a bit of a kicking. Now, you could take his heart rate and you'd say, this is a great heart rate. He's running down here within that ideal range of about 60 beats a minute, except for during the math test when it went up to over 80, but it recovered beautifully. So just taking the pulse is not going to tell you the whole story. That's why you have to do heart rate variability to find out what's really going on, because if this continues, then he'll start to develop some more heart problems. So right away we know what's going on here, that the limbic system is saying danger, and it's now out of balance, and there's too much sympathetics going on here. We look at skin conductance. I think I got this one for you. Here it is. Skin conductance. Skin conductance, you see the one on the top right-hand side, it's all within those little black marks there, and it goes up during the stress and goes down during recovery. Up and down with the exception to the last one. That's the way it should look. When we look at this person, we see that it starts out okay, and as soon as it hits the math test, it went out of normals and stayed there until after the breathing. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So what we know about the nervous system is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system work in conjunction with one another. One speeds things up, the other slows things down. We've got an unbalance going on here towards the side of speed up, and it's not slowing down. And a lot of this is coming from the cortex, from this subconscious that's unbalancing all of this. So now we're starting to see that this is starting to affect some health. Hand temperatures, cold, very cold. That's typical of sympathetics. It should look like that within those brackets. You see the picture on the right. It should look that way. It doesn't. It's way down below that. Matter of fact, it's sitting down there at about 78 degrees when it should be 93 to 96. And it's sitting down at 79 degrees. And you have people saying, well, my hands are always cold. That just tells you that's a chronic problem, that the nervous system is not in balance, it's not doing what it's supposed to, and eventually that's going to show up as effects. And the neat thing about it is we know that chiropractic changes the central nervous system function, including the autonomics and including the cortical activity. So the adjustment shifts this stuff, and then you start to retrain people by using the glasses and using neurofeedback. We look at the respiration rate. He gets a green circle in the respiration rate. Even though the math test, it's a little bit high, it recovers beautifully. During the breathing exercise, he dropped it down. So, this is where the patient report would go. You've got some problems that we need to deal with within your nervous system so that we can start getting green circles on all of these. This is the cause of the problem. So, let's go to number 2. Here's another one. And again, you can see that you should be able to know what we're going to talk about. Excuse me. We're going to talk about ratios, and right off the bat we're going to look at the ratios on here. We see the bottom one is sitting at about 19, and the top one is sitting at about 38. Well, we've got way too much beta in ratio to theta. So now we have somebody who has an over-aroused cortex going on. That means the brain is really into gear. But look what happens again. We do not see that picket fencing when they get stressed. And again, we see the shutdown on the math test. And those 3 different tests are accepted tests within these fields. Specifically, the math test under pressure of saying now, now, now. So anytime that they get under any kind of cognitive test where they have to think quickly and act quickly, they don't do well. They actually engage slightly during the noises. That's good. I'd like to see a lot better than that, but it's there. And they dropped off during the breathing exercise. So then we look over here at the theta activity, and we see that there is some attempt going on to get some theta up there but not after the math test. It started to come up after the noises. It didn't come up after the breathing. So it's not as bad as the last one, but it's still not, it's not looking like alpha looks here. So the alpha is definitely green. We have a little bit better going on the engagement, the picket fencing in SMR, but notice how low it is. So we have some things there that are different than the last one. Again, this person's heart rate, pretty good, and I love the way it goes up and down, even though it's just slightly out of the ideal, but it goes up and down during the stressors. That's what it's supposed to do. Again, we have too many bars in the heart rate variability in the high. We want to see them down to about 10, so we know that there's some challenges going on here. And I want you to take a look way down over here at the very low area, and notice the math test. Actually, we got a little spike going on there, so that math test affected their heart a bit. We need to recognize those. When those spikes get big in 30s and 40s, they got major problems. Skin conductance, this person's was within the normals, even though the operation of it wasn't exactly right, but it's not bad. At least it's within that normal area. But again, we have somebody with cold hands, and you can see that this one got worse as the test went on. So as the pressure in the test went on, this person's nervous system started to work less and less efficiently. The respiration rate, you compare this to the last person. This person starts out breathing very high. They did the math test. They held their breath. Then they held it after. Instead of coming back up, they held it even more. I mean, this was kind of strange. And then it went back up, and it went up after the noises. This is really kind of chaotic. This isn't right. And she or he, I'm not sure which it was, got to drop this down very nicely during the breathing, and that helps. Now, Carrie-Ann was not able to do the SEMGs on this. We didn't get the pads to her in time, unfortunately. But this would have given us a whole bunch more information as to how they were breathing and when they were breathing, so that we can really take a look at what's going on with the heart rate variability and how we can help them breathe better. So you can see again the temperatures, what would be normal and what would be normal in respiration rate compared to this one. It's not good. So we've got some things to work with. The third one to go over is this one. And I just put this up here so that we should be able to know what we're looking at right now. If we take and do an average on this, we're going to be running at about 31, probably 32 in beta, and we're going to be running here at about 22 in theta. So within that normal range, so ratios are not so much of a problem. But if you'll notice the picket fencing, we have the picket fencing showing up here, but it's completely the reverse of what we should be seeing on an ideal spot. Every time that we stress the individual, they shut down their beta activity. They weren't able to focus. They turned it off. And every time that we stress them, though, the subconscious, the theta, went up. This is a typical ADD pattern. And about 50% of the adults wandering around out there are ADD. Now, you've got to remember that ADD is a response of a protective mechanism by the brain to protect itself from burning out. When you get put under a lot of stress and start to break down, it's called post-traumatic stress disorders. If post-traumatic stress disorder stays in place, we end up with chaos. And you will see it as an exhausted nervous system where it's really chaotic. None of this stuff makes any sense. But the brain knows to protect itself. So what it does is it says, I've had all the stress I can handle. I'm not going to take any more. I'm going to turn off. So what it does is it protects itself. Every time we stress it, it says, nope, not going there. And it just turns itself off. The problem is it turns itself off consciously, but not subconsciously. So subconsciously, the limbic system is still getting the message from the cortex that there is a saber-toothed tiger chasing you. And that's where we're going to start to see some problems going on. So this person, while they're sitting there looking cool, calm, and relaxed, because look at the alpha, it's very nice. Look at the SMR, it's very nice. That's the way those two are supposed to look. And the SMR is able to keep him going because, or her going, because it keeps the brain cleared out as the day progresses. Every time you relax a little bit, it cleans itself out so you can keep thinking and not just get, throwing stuff in the closet so you can't close the closet door anymore. That's what happens with brains that can't clear themselves out. So what we've got here is an ADD response on this individual. What does that do to the limbic system? Look at the heart rate. We have a heart rate that's operating above normals, and it has a chaotic response after the noises. The emotions hit the heart. Instead of it going up, the heart rate went down, and then it went up after during relaxation. It also went up during the breathing instead of down during the breathing. So we've got some problems going on there. We also have heart rate variability problems, and you'll notice that breathing test was the worst. We need to teach this person how to do the breathing properly because there's something wrong with the way that they're breathing that makes this even worse. This is not good. Again, we start to see spikes showing up, little taller spikes now, in the very low in the heart rate variability. When you have people that have bad heart rate variability and they have lots of tall columns in the very low area, they're a candidate for a cardiac event. If they've already had one, they're going to have another one. It's just a matter of when. This is absolutely accurate. Whoop. So next one is skin conductance. Now you'll notice that the other ones we've seen, one of them was a little high and the other one was okay. This one is very low. It is sitting down there below 0.5. When you see this kind of pattern, this suggests that there's been a chronic stress pattern with this individual. Something over a long period of time, and this particular response is literally burned out. We can bring it back, but right now it's just that the nervous system is just saying, I can't deal with that anymore. I need all the energy I can to deal with what else is going on, because this has been going on for a long time. This is not a simple little pattern, and it goes back up to when we look at that ADD as a protective measurement. Something has happened in this individual's lifetime that was some major stress, and it's had an effect that's ongoing that we need to get back in balance. Look at the hand temperature, same thing. The hand temperatures are low, below normal. That's a sympathetic response. It's a nervous system that's out of balance. Look at the respiration rates. We start high. It drops during the math test where it should have gone up. It went up after, and then it dropped during the noises and went up. This is an inverse response, and the only good thing I can say about it is they managed to get the breathing slowed down on their own. So that gives us just a tremendous amount of information as to what we're looking at. So I hope you can take what we've gone over today and apply it to what you have in front of you as your test, and you have the written report that I put in there for you so you know what's going on there. Now, if you want to get into things such as what kind of adjusting patterns and so on, that's a whole different discussion that we go through at our training and with our various webinars. But I just wanted to make sure you've got some information to be able to determine what you are actually looking at here. So I want to go back to the very start of this and say, you know what, I think and therefore I am, or I don't know, so maybe I'm not. And unfortunately, the majority of people in this world today fall into this category because they assume that they're well, they assume that they're healthy as long as they don't have any symptoms. And it's not true. And we have people who are aerobic instructors, we have people who are distance runners, we have elite Olympic athletes that we take a look at what's going on with them, and they think that they're healthy, and we look at their nervous systems and say, you need to do some changes in your lifestyle and in your functioning, and we need to deal with this because you had no idea that the nervous system was out of balance until it's too late and it gives you signs and symptoms. So that's what this is really all about, and I hope that you're using the Zen frames. We work very closely with them. We are going to be working with Dr. Porter to develop specific frequency Zen frame exercises that match for people's particular problems that we see in the neuroinfinity and the stress response. For instance, if they're dialing too much beta, we want them to learn how to dial in SMR, which just slows beta down. If they're not dialing in enough alpha, we need to have special frequencies that give people that experience of true alpha or low beta or high theta so that they can then experience what that really feels like, so then we can teach them how to do that on their own. Any questions at this particular point?
All right, guys, online, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand through the control panel and I will unmute you, or you can ask your question by typing it in through the control panel. Are there any questions? Carrie Ann, is there anything you want to add based on your experience with the seminar for the weekend?
I basically just wanted to say that I wanted to talk about the protocol for doing the Zen frames on the patients, because seeing the neuroinfinity and being able to assess what's going on inside of their activity in their brain waves is definitely going to help more success inside of each patient. Having this view of what's happening inside of them at first initial visit, where, like I told a lot of doctors this weekend, it would take me quite a while to be transparent enough or have a comfort zone with them to be able to spill out some of the things that have happened in my past. So this is an opportunity for the doctors to have all of this information up front and see how their theta and their beta are responding to the way that they deal with life.
Okay. And that's the great gem about this. I know that when Dr. Porter and myself first met one another, we were across the aisle at a show, and I was watching what was going on over in his booth, and he was watching what was going on over in my booth. So we sort of met in the middle and said, what are you doing? And so what we did was we took his glasses and we put them on the individual, we hooked them up to a lifetime session, and we watched as the glasses changed brain frequencies through the programs that Dr. Porter had developed. That was very impressive in that it did what he said it did, and we could then see, saying, great, now we can introduce these people to these experiences. It's wonderful. And he was very thrilled about what we were doing as well, because it absolutely justified what he has, and he could see that what we were doing over in there gave great guidelines for chiropractors to be able to determine which programs should be used with the patient.
Okay. All right, looks like there aren't any questions. Maybe they'll have some that they can email in later. You guys all should know how to reach Carrie Ann. I know she'll be following up with you. So I would like to thank you for your participation today, and I hope Dr. Barwell was able to shed some light on what this all means. Dr. B, you want to say any words in closing?
That's about it. Go back to your practices and enjoy and know that there's great instrumentation out there for you to do a better job.
Awesome. All right, guys, we also have this webinar recorded, so Carrie Ann it'll take us usually within 24 hours, we'll have the link available. So if Dr. Barwell, if one of your scans was the one that he went over and you would like to review that, Carrie Ann will have access to send you that recording later. All right, thanks everyone for attending, and have a great day.